Right, hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're continuing the slow cooker series and following a request from a couple of people, not least including Tracy. We're on a vegetarian option today, so we're on pumpkin risotto. So I hope you enjoy this one. So first of all, I've got my slow cooker on. I've got him on a high temperature, and I'm going to start just by adding a little bit of butter into the slow cooker. So I reckon I'm looking at something in the order of about 20 to 30 grams. You could use oil, you could use vegetable oil, sunflower oil, olive oil. I prefer butter. I think you want something that's a little bit rich and creamy anyway, so that would be my preference. So I'm going to start off with a couple of onions. So what I'm going to do here is peel and finely dice these onions. These are, so I'm using two onions, two small to medium onions, I'd say. So what I'm going to do is cut through the root. I'm going to cut the end, not the root end, the other end here, the small end here, create like a flap. I'm just going to pull it back and peel, but keeping the root end intact. And then all I'm going to do with the root end, with the sort of hairy bits here, is just sort of pull them off with my fingers. So I've got something like this. That helps when I'm fine dicing to keep the onion intact. So now I'm just going to slice along the length of the onion up to the root, which is still intact. But you'll see I'm still attached to the roots here. So I've sliced into it, but I'm still attached to the roots. If you were looking for a super fine dice, you could then also slice into the middle like this. So I'll do one here. You could slice into it like this. But generally for what we're doing today with the risotto, I'm not too fussed, so I'm not going to do that with the others. So, and then just chop against it. So really you're looking for as fine as you can, but you know, don't torture yourself about getting it, you know, super fine. But really, a nice risotto, you don't want sort of clumpy, you don't want clumpy big bits of onion through it, you know? You want this really to sort of melt through the risotto. So I'm trying to waste as little as possible as well, so I chop right up to my root and round it, and then I'm literally just discarding the tiniest bit there. Okay, so I'm going to put my onion in with my slowly melting butter here. And I'm going to give this a quick stir as well. Just make sure that the onion's in the butter. There we are. And I'm going to use the same board, I'm going to use the same knife to prepare celery. So I'm going to wash 3 stalks of celery for this. So 1, 2, 3. And all I'm going to do with the celery is just give it a quick, just under the cold water. I'm just running my thumb through the inside, looking for any muck. Rub it along the grooves. And I'm going to do a similar dice on the celery as with the onion. So I'm going to start off by taking the ends off of the celery. So just take these ends off. And to make it easier for chopping, I'm going to cut this in half along the length. So just like so. And then I'm going to do 3 at a time. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to slice it along the length, just as finely as I can. Like so. And I tend to do it in bundles of just sort of one stalk or a stalk and a half at a time, because it makes it easier to chop. So once I've got it along the length, I'm just going back along it and dicing like this. It's the same like the onions, you know, don't torture yourself, but try and get it as fine as you can. And then I'll put this in. And just give it a quick stir as well. Okay, so next up's the butternut squash. So again, I'm just going to use the same board, same knife again. I've got no problem with that. Butternut squash is one of those things that not everybody knows how to prepare. Some people get a little bit intimidated by them. Here's a really easy way that I find. You've got two parts to the butternut squash. So you've got the sort of solid core, the easy bit to chop. Then you've got the chamber at the bottom where the seeds are. So what I tend to do is cut it roughly in half towards the bottom like this. You'll see, here is the solid bit, solid all the way through. This is the bit that contains the seeds at the bottom. So what I'll do is I'll take the bottom off, and I'm going to cut this into segments. I'm going to cut this into 8 segments. So cutting the bottom off gives me a stable base, means it's not going to fall over, I'm not going to hurt myself trying to do this. So I cut this in half along the length, and then into quarters. And then each of the quarters into 8ths. And once you've got it into 8, it's easy to be able to scoop the seeds out. You could use a teaspoon, you could use like a table knife. I've got a sort of sharper knife to hand here. So I'm going to scoop out the seeds. Okay, once the seeds are out, it's easier to peel just in these small segments. So if you've got a veg peeler, that's the easiest thing to do, is just use a veg peeler. My peeler is knackered, so I'm just using a paring knife here. So feel free to do this as well. You've got to be careful with squashes that got really quite a tough skin on them, so you do have to put quite a pressure when you're peeling. I'd probably advise you to use a peeler rather than do what I'm doing. Here we are. So once I've got these 8 peeled and deseeded segments, all I'm looking to do with this is give them a bit of a dice. I reckon each of these sort of segments I'm going to chop into 3 along the length, and then each of these I'm just going to chop roughly along. So something like this, a rough sort of dice here. So you're never gonna manage to get all of these looking, you know, exactly the same shape and size. That's never going to happen. So don't torture yourself too much with that. But roughly the same sort of size. That would be enough. Okay. So I'm now going to chop the main part of the butternut squash. This one's a little bit easier in some ways. We don't have the seeds to contend with in this. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm just taking the end off. Like so. Again, if you're doing this at home, you'd be using a peeler. I'm just going to use my paring knife, and I'm just going to peel this down the way. So I'm finding this is actually a little bit tricky. It's probably a little bit too much for the peeler, for the paring knife to contend with. I'm just going to chop it in half again along the length. The most important thing is that you don't cut your fingers off, so I'd go for safety first every time. So look, all I'm doing You've got various ways you could do this. You could go around this in a round. Or you could go up and down. Whatever works best for you. But you do have to be careful with it when doing this, like it is a really tough skin, the butternut skin. Okay, so I've got the solid chamber of the butternut squash peeled now. All I'm going to do is just slice along the length. So I don't know, what is that, thickness of a pound coin, 1.5, 2 pound coin, something like that. Right, I've just taken the chamber of that and I'm into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So something like that. So all you're going to do is each of these slices now is cut along that as well. And then back along itself. And we're looking for another dice, roughly similar sort of size to the butternut squash we've already diced from the seeded chamber. So. Okay, so we've got a whole chopped butternut squash here. I'm just going to put this in with the onion and the celery. Okay, so I'm going to add a vegetable stock and arborio rice to this. So I'm looking for roughly about 800 millilitres of vegetable stock, between 800 mils and a litre of vegetable stock, and I'm looking for roughly about 300 grams of arborio rice. So I say roughly, I'm not going to weigh it out, I'm not going to measure it. I'm looking for roughly about 1/3 of a kilo pack here. So next up, I'm going to add my vegetable stock. So I've got roughly about a litre of vegetable stock in here, sort of between 800 mils and a litre. Key thing for me, I mean, look, 800 mils to a litre is a good guide. Key thing is to not get too hung up on, you know, exact amounts. The most important thing is that you want to cover your rice and your squash with the liquid, but you are going to come back to this. So this is going to cook out for between about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. What I will do is come back in an hour's time. I'm going to check the stock levels, and I'm going to potentially add a little bit more stock. I'd always, when making a risotto, I work on the principle of you can always add it, but you can't take it out again. So what you don't want is a really sort of soupy, wet slop. What you want is something that will sort of hold together a little bit. You want something sort of creamy and rich, and something that will have a bit of give, but not too wet. So we'll revisit this in an hour. We'll add more stock if necessary. Okay, so risotto's been cooking away in our slow cooker here for just under 2 hours. So I'm just gonna, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna check and see how my rice is. So I have topped this up with a tiny little bit of veg stock while it was cooking, but not very much really. Key thing I want is to make sure that my rice is cooked. So that's the first thing. So, yep, my rice is cooked. It's still got a little bit, tiny bit of bite in there. It's not complete mush, but it's definitely cooked. So that's good. The taste at this point is pretty dull. We haven't got any salt in here other than the salt that's in the veg stock. But what we're going to do now is we're going to liven it up a little bit. But I also want to get some butter through it. So I'm going to work some butter through it first of all. This would be something that I would do if I was making a risotto conventionally in a saucepan. So what am I putting in? I'm putting in about, I don't know, 25 grams maybe of butter, something like that. This is good. This will taste good. This works. This is going to feed a family. This is going to put a smile on your face, especially in the winter time, you know. But I think for any of the purists out there, any of the, you know, big risotto fans, you know, you're not gonna achieve exactly the same result as you are when you're cooking a risotto out on a gas stove or something like that. But the key thing to bear in mind is that this takes a fraction of the energy when cooking it, and also there's very little interfering. This isn't something that you have to stand over. It's not something that you have to work very hard at. You can just leave it to work its magic, you know. So I'm going to add in the parmesan now. So I'll give you the amounts after. I've got no idea. I'm just gonna keep grating, to be honest, until I get fed up. The more parmesan, the better for me. So I'm going to stir that through. I'm probably going to add a bit more as well, but I'll just stir this in. And this is exactly the texture I'm looking for from a risotto as well. When I plate this up, you'll hopefully get an idea of the texture we're sort of aiming for here. So we don't want something so sort of stiff and dry that it's just going to stay a sort of stodgy mess, but we don't want anything too loose that's just going to collapse. So we want something that sort of holds its form for a wee bit and then sort of slowly oozes out. So let's give this a wee. That is very nice. A little bit more parmesan. So here I'm using, by the way, just to get an idea of amounts, I'm using a 200 gram pack of parmesan here. I reckon we're putting in about 60 grams, something like that. You can cut down on this. Parmesan is obviously not a cheap cheese, you know, so you could cut down on this. But if you cut down and use less parmesan, you will need to use a little bit of salt. Okay? As I always say, anyone in my kitchen, the key thing is to just keep tasting. And that for me is absolutely spot on. So I'm going to plate this, and all I'm going to do when I'm plating it is I'm just going to finish it off with a little bit of chopped sage. So, firstly, when I'm putting it in the bowl, it sort of holds and then splodges. So that's my first indicator of what I'm looking for. There we are. So look, this is free. I would say that's free, sort of generous-ish starters. You know what? You'll definitely get 4 generous mains out of this. You could use other herbs. This would work really quite nicely with tarragon as well. It worked nicely, a bit of parsley. I'm always a bit of a fan of chopped flat leaf parsley, but for me, I think sage is the king. And all I would do with this would be serve it with a nice side salad, bit of crusty bread. If you want, feel free to look on the channel. We've got a focaccia bread recipe up there as well. That'll work really quite well with this. So here we are, butternut squash risotto cooked in a slow cooker with a bit of chopped sage. I hope you liked this. I hope you're up for giving it a go. And as always, please comment, like and subscribe. It all helps the cause. Cheers.